What if the key to unlocking your entire future was hidden in your past, worn on the wrist of a stranger? What if a single, whispered name could unravel a lifetime of secrets and lies? For one waitress, struggling to keep her head above water, a single glance at a customer's bracelet changed everything. This is a story about a name etched in silver, a love torn apart by greed, and a test of character so profound it could shatter a young woman's spirit or forge her into the person she was always meant to be. The scent of stale coffee and burnt grease clung to Alara's uniform like a second skin. It was the smell of survival, of another 16-hour double shift at the Greasy Spoon Diner, of the mounting medical bills for her grandmother that sat in a menacing pile on her small kitchen table. Each plate she carried, each fake smile she offered, was a tiny step away from the abyss of debt that threatened to swallow them whole. Her grandmother, the only family she had ever known, was fading, and Alara's world was shrinking to the four walls of this diner and the cramped apartment they shared. Most customers were a blur of faces, their orders a monotonous rhythm in the symphony of her exhaustion. But he was different. He sat alone in the corner booth, a man who seemed to absorb the very light in the room. He wore a suit that cost more than her annual rent, its dark wool a stark contrast to the cracked vinyl of the seat. He hadn't looked at the menu, just ordered a black coffee, his eyes distant and shadowed with a sorrow that felt ancient. Alara had seen wealth before, but this was different. This was power, insulated by a layer of profound loneliness. She refilled his cup, her movements practiced and efficient. As she reached over, her gaze fell to his wrist. A simple, elegant silver chain lay against his skin. It wasn't flashy, but it was clearly expensive, each link perfectly formed. But it wasn't the silver that made her breath catch in her throat. It was the small, engraved plate at its center. The cursive was delicate, a single name etched into the metal. Her voice was a whisper, a sound she hadn't meant to make. Serafina. The man didn't move. For a long moment, the clatter of the diner, the sizzling of the grill, all of it faded into a dull hum. He slowly lifted his head, and his eyes, a startlingly clear gray, locked onto hers. They were filled with a storm of confusion and disbelief. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She pointed a trembling finger at the bracelet. That name, Serafina. That's my mother's name. The world tilted. The heavy glass of red wine he'd ordered with a meal he hadn't touched slipped from his grasp. It shattered on the linoleum floor, a splash of crimson blooming like a wound. The sound was a gunshot in the quiet moment, but neither of them flinched. The man, the powerful, reclusive billionaire Julian Croft, a man whose face was known only from rare, grainy photos in business journals, could only stare at the young waitress, his carefully constructed universe fractured by a single word. The diner staff rushed to clean the spill, their chatter a nervous buzz around the silent tableau in the corner booth. Julian Croft didn't seem to notice them. His focus was entirely on Alara, his expression a mask of shock and something deeper, something that looked like pain. He waved a dismissive hand at his security guard who had started to move towards them. "Leave it," he said, his voice raspy, strained. He looked back at Alara, who stood frozen, the coffee pot still in her hand. "What did you say your mother's name was?" "Serafina?" Alara repeated, her voice steadier this time, though her hands trembled. "Her name was Serafina. She passed away when I was a child. I was raised by her mother, my grandmother." Julian's throat worked, but no sound came out. He gestured to the seat opposite him, an unspoken command. Alara, moving as if in a dream, slowly slid into the booth, placing the coffee pot on the table with a clink. The smell of spilled wine was sharp in the air. "This bracelet," he began, his voice low, intense. "I had it made over 25 years ago. There is only one in the world. For a woman I knew named Serafina." He looked from her face to the bracelet and back again, searching for something he seemed desperate to find. "Tell me about your mother." Alara's story was simple, fragmented by the haze of childhood memory. She spoke of a kind, gentle woman with a sad smile and a love for painting sunsets. She spoke of the locket her mother always wore, a simple silver oval she now kept in a box, and the lullabies she used to sing. She didn't have much more. Her grandmother rarely spoke of Serafina. The grief was too deep, a wound that had never properly healed. As she spoke, Julian listened with an unnerving stillness. He didn't interrupt. He just watched, his gray eyes tracing the lines of her face, the curve of her jaw, the color of her eyes. When she finished, a heavy silence fell between them. "I know this is an extraordinary request," he finally said, his composure slowly returning, though the shock still lingered in his eyes. "But I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. I need to understand this. I will compensate you for your time, of course." Handsomely, he named a figure that made Alara's mind reel. It was more than she made in 6 months. It was enough to cover 2 months of her grandmother's new medication. "Why?" she asked, bewildered. "It's just a name. To you, perhaps," Julian said, his gaze dropping back to the silver chain on his wrist. "To me, it was everything." He pulled a sleek black card from his wallet and slid it across the table. 10 o'clock. The address is on the card. A car will be waiting for you outside your apartment at 9:30. He knew her address? The thought sent a brief shiver of unease through her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the sheer gravity of the moment. This was happening. This was real. The next morning, Alara stood before the gleaming glass and steel skyscraper of Croft Enterprises, feeling as though she'd stepped into another dimension. The diner felt a million miles away. The luxury car that had picked her up was silent and smooth, a world away from the rattling city bus she took every day. Dressed in her only presentable blouse and a pair of dark slacks, she felt hopelessly out of place. She was whisked to the top floor, a penthouse office with panoramic views of the city that stretched out like a map below. The space was minimalist and sterile, decorated in shades of gray and chrome. It was the office of a man who commanded the world but seemed to take no joy in it. Julian Croft stood waiting for her by the floor-to-ceiling windows, dressed in another impeccable suit. He looked less haunted than the night before, but a tense energy radiated from him. "Thank you for coming, Alara," he said, his voice formal. He gestured to a pair of leather chairs. "Please." She sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mr. Croft, I still don't quite understand." "Julian, please," he corrected her gently. He sat opposite her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Last night, you said your mother's name was Serafina. This bracelet was a gift I gave to the woman I loved, more than 25 years ago. Her name was also Serafina. We were going to be married." His voice cracked on the last word, a fissure in his carefully controlled exterior. This was the first true twist of the knife, the confirmation that this was no coincidence. This man hadn't just known someone with her mother's name. He had loved her. "What happened to her?" Alara asked softly, her own heart aching for the raw pain in his voice. "She disappeared," Julian said, the words stark and brutal. "One day she was there, the next she was gone. She left a note, said she couldn't do it, that she was sorry. She never told me where she was going. I spent years searching for her, hired the best private investigators money could buy. But it was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth." He looked at Alara, his gaze piercing. "You have her eyes, the same shade of blue." Alara felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. Could this be real? Could this powerful, broken man be the great lost love of her mother's life? Her grandmother had always said her father was a man who wasn't in the picture, a fleeting romance. She never gave a name, never offered a story. Was this him? Before she could process the thought, the office door swung open. A younger man, sharp-featured and dressed with an air of arrogant entitlement, strode in without knocking. "Uncle Julian, we have the board meeting in 20 minutes. What is this?" His eyes swept over Alara, his expression a mixture of disdain and suspicion. He dismissed her in a single glance, turning his attention back to Julian. "Marcus, this is not the time," Julian said, his tone turning to ice. "With all due respect, Uncle," This woman is a waitress from a greasy spoon diner, Marcus said, his voice dripping with condescension. I had security run a background check the moment you put her on your schedule. Alara Vance, piled high with debt, a sick relative. It's a classic story. She sees a wealthy man, hears a name, and suddenly she's got a connection to your long-lost sob story. Don't be a fool. The words hit Alara like a physical blow. She flushed with shame and anger. That's not true. I didn't know who he was. I just saw the name. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course you didn't. And I'm sure you're not expecting a single penny for your troubles. He looked at Julian, his expression hardening. We have a multi-billion-dollar merger on the line. You can't afford this kind of distraction. Get rid of her. That is enough, Marcus, Julian snapped, rising to his feet. The power in the room shifted, and for the first time, Alara saw the ruthless billionaire the world knew. You are dismissed. I will handle this, and you will treat my guest with respect. Marcus's jaw tightened, a flicker of resentment in his eyes. He gave Alara one last withering look before turning on his heel and leaving, slamming the door behind him. The air in the room crackled with tension. Julian let out a long, weary sigh and sank back into his chair. I apologize for my nephew. He is ambitious. He seemed to make a decision. He is also wrong. There is something here. I can feel it. He stood and walked over to a large, ornate safe concealed behind a panel in the wall. He spun the dial, the clicks echoing in the silent office, and pulled out a small wooden box. He placed it on the table between them. I've kept these for 25 years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Everything she ever gave me. Everything I have left of her. He opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were a few dried flowers, a faded photograph of a smiling young woman with Alara's eyes, and a small stack of letters tied with a silk ribbon. Alara's breath hitched. The woman in the photo was undeniably her mother. May I? She whispered. Julian nodded, pushing the box towards her. With trembling fingers, Alara untied the ribbon and picked up the top letter. The handwriting was her mother's, a familiar, elegant script she recognized from the few birthday cards she had kept. She began to read aloud, her voice soft. My dearest Jay, I don't know how to say this. Everything feels so complicated, so impossible. My heart tells me to stay, to fight for us. But the world feels like it's closing in. The letters were filled with love and turmoil. They spoke of a deep, passionate romance, but also of a looming shadow, an unnamed pressure that was forcing them apart. They didn't explain what it was, only that Serafina felt trapped, terrified of a future she couldn't control. Julian watched Alara, his face a canvas of old grief and new, burgeoning hope. Then, in the second-to-last letter, Alara found the line that changed everything. There's something else, my love. Something I haven't had the courage to tell you. A part of me is a part of you now. A secret I must carry alone. It's the only way to protect our miracle from the storm that is coming. Please, forgive me. Alara looked up from the page, her eyes wide with tears. A secret. A miracle. Julian's face had gone pale. A child. He breathed, the realization dawning on him with devastating force. She was pregnant. He stared at Alara, truly seeing her for the first time, not just as a woman who looked like his lost love, but as the living embodiment of that secret. The miracle. It was you. The weight of the revelation settled over them, a profound, earth-shattering truth. He wasn't just her mother's lost love. He was her father. A few days later, while Julian was arranging for a DNA test to make it official, Alara was cornered by Marcus in the lobby of the Croft Enterprises building. He had been watching her, his presence a constant, unnerving shadow. I have to hand it to you, he began, stepping in front of her to block her path. It's a brilliant performance. The teary eyes, the trembling hands. You almost have him convinced. It's not a performance, Alara said, standing her ground. It's the truth. Truth is a flexible concept, Marcus sneered, especially when a fortune is at stake. My uncle is a sentimental old fool, lost in the past. But I'm not. I see you for what you are. A grifter. He pulled a checkbook from his jacket pocket and a pen. Let's cut to the chase. How much will it take to make you disappear? Name your price. 100,000? 2? I'll write the check right now and you walk away. You never contact him again. And you go back to your miserable little life, only slightly less miserable. He held the pen poised over the check, his eyes glinting with smug certainty. This was her test. Everything in her life had conditioned her to take the money. It was a fortune. It would solve everything. Her grandmother's bills, the debt, the constant grinding worry. It was an escape hatch from a life of struggle. But as she looked at his cynical, cruel face, she saw more than just an offer of money. She saw a dismissal of her mother's memory, a denial of her own existence. She thought of Julian's grief-stricken face, the decades of pain he had endured, believing he had been abandoned. Taking this money would validate every lie, every ugly assumption. It would mean her mother's love and her own life were worth nothing more than a buyout. No, she said, her voice clear and firm. Marcus blinked, surprised. I'm sorry. I said no, Elara repeated, a fire igniting within her. You think this is about money? This is about my family. This is about the truth. And that is not for sale. Not for any price. She pushed past him, leaving him standing there, checkbook in hand, utterly dumbfounded. In that moment, Elara transformed. The desperate, struggling waitress was gone, replaced by a woman of unshakable conviction. She had been offered the easy way out and had chosen the hard path of integrity. She was her mother's daughter, but she was also her father's. The DNA results came back a week later. They were a perfect match. The scientific fact was just a formality. In his heart, Julian had known it from the moment he truly looked at her. The revelation opened the floodgates of the past. Elara, now staying in a guest suite in Julian's penthouse, spent hours with him, poring over the letters, trying to piece together the final days of his relationship with her mother. There was still one piece missing. Why had she left so abruptly? The letters spoke of fear, but of what? Her grandmother's memory, clouded by age and sorrow, offered only fragments. She remembered Serafina being distraught, speaking of threats, of a powerful family that would never accept her. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, Julian's old financial ledgers. While searching for any payments made to private investigators at the time, his archivist found an entry for a large, one-time payment to a man Julian didn't recognize. But the name next to it made his blood run cold. It was his own father, Alistair Croft, a ruthless, domineering man who had controlled every aspect of Julian's young life. Driven by a terrible suspicion, they searched Alistair's old files, which had been kept in storage. There, tucked away in a folder labeled Family Contingencies, was a final, unsent letter from Serafina to Julian. It had clearly been intercepted. Elara read it, her voice shaking with rage and sorrow. My love, I am being forced away. Your father came to see me. He said if I did not leave you, he would destroy not just my life, but the lives of my entire family. He said you were destined for greatness and I was a distraction he would not tolerate. He made me write that other note, the one that broke your heart. I am so sorry, Julian. He doesn't know about the baby. I will protect our child. Even if it means I can never see you again. I will love you forever. Your Serafina. The truth was a brutal, cleansing fire. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't Serafina's choice. It was a deliberate act of cruelty by Julian's own father. A lifetime of grief, redirected in an instant into white-hot anger at the betrayal. His father had not only stolen the love of his life, but he had stolen his child. He had let his own son suffer for decades, all for the sake of ambition and control. Just then, Marcus walked into the study, a triumphant smirk on his face. Well, still playing happy families? I have some news that might spoil the party. I've had my legal team look into those letters. They're easily forged. And I found a witness, an old diner employee, willing to testify that he heard you two conspiring. This fraudulent claim of yours is over. But the man he was speaking to was not the grieving, distracted uncle he knew. Julian rose slowly from his desk, his gray eyes like chips of granite. In his hand, he held the intercepted letter. "My father stole my life from me, Marcus," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He did it out of a twisted sense of duty and pride. You are trying to do the same thing, but you're not even a shadow of the man he was. You do it out of pure, pathetic greed." "I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus blustered, his confidence faltering. "Don't you?" Julian's voice rose, filled with the fury of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left to fear. "While you were busy trying to discredit my daughter, I had my auditors look into your division. The offshore accounts, the inflated expense reports, the shell corporations. You've been embezzling from this company for years. You are a thief, Marcus, just like your grandfather." Marcus's face went white. He was trapped, exposed. His arrogance crumbled into raw panic. "Uncle, we can fix this." "No," Julian said, the word final. "You are finished. Security will escort you from the building. You are no longer a part of this company, and you are no longer a part of this family." He picked up the phone on his desk. "Security, my nephew is ready to leave. And have the police meet him in the lobby." Marcus stared, defeated, as two security guards entered the room. His reign of cynical ambition was over, brought down not by a corporate rival, but by the simple, undeniable power of truth. Justice was swift. Marcus was arrested, his crimes laid bare for the world to see. Julian, with Alara by his side, addressed the board, not with excuses, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He introduced Alara not just as his heir, but as the new heart of the company, a reminder of what truly mattered. Her grandmother's medical care was now the best in the world. With the financial burden lifted, and the joy of seeing her family whole again, she began to recover, her spirit returning day by day. Alara's new reality was one of security and love, a world she was shaping with the same integrity she had shown in the diner. Weeks later, Alara and Julian stood in her grandmother's sunlit hospital room. The old woman was sitting up in bed, holding Julian's hand, tears of joy streaming down her face as she looked between her granddaughter and the man her daughter had loved so fiercely. The silver bracelet with Serafina etched on it now lay on the bedside table, a symbol no longer of loss, but of a love that had endured across time and tragedy. The circle was finally complete. This story teaches us that our past is never truly gone. It reminds us that integrity is not what we do when people are watching, but the choice we make when we think no one sees. In a world that often values wealth over worth, the greatest fortune we can ever find is the truth of who we are and the family we belong to. How many other secrets are out there, waiting for a chance encounter to bring them into the light? If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of truth and family, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational content.